Good morning. Welcome to this session about Blazor. I know there's a lot of awesome sessions going on at the same time, so I'm really happy that you chose to come to this session. We're going to do some really fun stuff, you chose wisely. You know the feeling when your product manager comes into the room and says, "I want a new feature. I want just a small feature, but I want that feature to be interactive feature. I want that feature to not reload the page." And you stand there and you listen to all the good things that the manager says, and you slowly realize the amount of JavaScript involved. And this is kind of the reality that most of us C# developers face. How many of you like working with JavaScript? Is it more than I thought? But instead of saying no, you say, "Sure, I can do that. I'm ready. I can do that." But for most of us, it's going to be painful. It's going to be a lot of pain involved. So we have a couple of options. We can start code underwater because no one can see you cry. But I'm going to show you another way. I'm going to show you the Blazor way. And we're going to talk about the past, the present, and the future. My name is Jim Engström, and I have a confession. I really hate working with JavaScript. Truly. From the bottom of my heart. I work at Erik Penser Bank here in Stockholm, and we are converting a lot of our technology to Blazor. I'm a Windows development MVP, and together with my wife, I run a company called Awesome Dev. We also run a podcast together called Coding After Work. So if you like podcasts, please check that out. We have a couple of Blazor episodes in there as well. But let's start with the past, because it makes most sense. Steve Sanderson had a talk at NDC in 2017, a WebAssembly talk. And he thought, would it be possible to challenge WebAssembly in any way? So we took an open source project, open source .NET project, and converted that to WebAssembly. So he was able to run .NET code on WebAssembly, running in the web browser. And there were other employees from the ASP.NET team in the audience, and they were just, "He did what?" And they took all of that back to the office, and Blazor was born. There's a common misconception that Blazor is WebAssembly. That is not the case. It's one way of running Blazor, but we will come back to that. Which leads us into the present. What can we do? So Blazor, the name comes from browser and combined with Razor. And Razor is the way. How many of you have used Razor before? Most of you. So Razor is a way that you can mix markup and code together. I did mention that we started to do this conversion to Blazor where I work. And we noticed a couple of things. It's really easy to get started. It's really fast to get things done. And especially, it's simple to make things that was previously very hard to do, or at least for me, because JavaScript. So it works like this. We have a server with Razor components. The Razor components knows nothing about Blazor at this point. Then we have Blazor. Blazor is going to run upon that. So the Razor components are going to create an output. That output is going to come into a render tree. Blazor is going to create a render tree. So we will have, in this case, an H1 and a button. That's fine. Awesome. Then on the browser side of things, we will have a DOM. No, we're not. We're not going to have a DOM. There we go. We're going to have a DOM and a little piece of JavaScript. And the server side is going to create a SignalR connection to the client. So all the changes we have here is going to get pushed over to the JavaScript and pushed and changed the DOM. And if I click the button, that event is going to go down over SignalR and into our Razor component. The Razor component is then going to re-render the page, change the output. In this case, I changed a Z to an S. Push that change, and that change only over to the JavaScript, and the JavaScript will update the DOM. So let's see how this looks in code. And we're going to do a to-do app. And I have named that to-do app Mana Mana. Why, you ask? To-do. I'm sorry, I like puns. So in here we have a couple of projects. We have the Mana Mana project, and that's a server-side Blazor project. We have the API project, which is going to be the back end. I'm not going to talk a lot about the API project because I'm sure all of you know how to create an API. Then we have the Razor product, manamana.razor. And here we will have the shared Razor files. We will reuse them in a later demo. And last but not least, the shared project. So in here, we only have one class, the to-do item. And this is shared between the server side, the Razor project, the Manamana project, and the API project. This file, the to-do item file, contains an ID. It contains an isDone, a title, and a description. Pretty much the things that you want to have in a to-do item. It also has a couple of attributes. I require the title to be something, and I want it to be at least 5 characters. I don't know if that limitation makes sense, but for this demo, we're going to say that I want 5 characters, nothing less. The API project looks like this. Not going to go through all items, but we have a method called addItem. We have getItems. We have getOneItem. And all this does is to get or save it to SQLite database. There we go. So if we go to our Manamana project and we run the project, this usually is a bit faster. Come on. I'm running a session here. Come on. There we go. This is how typically the default project looks like with just a file new Blazor project. We have a counter. If I press the button, the counter counts up. This could be a session all by itself, right? No JavaScript. Well, there is some JavaScript, but none that I had to write. We have a fetch data, which gets some temperatures. And we have a to-do list, which is empty because we're going to build that together. If you take a look at the counter, you will see the Razor syntax. So what we have here is we have a page directive. So we're going to say that the counter page is going to be available from /counter. So if I type /counter in the Internet Explorer or something, it's going to show this page. We're going to start with the code down here. So down here we have a code section and a current count, just a simple variable. And when I run this method, the increment count method, it's going to count up the current count. And I'm showing the current count up here. As you can see, I have a paragraph tag, I have some text, and then I have the @ sign. The @ sign is informing the compiler that, hey, I want something to be output. I want code to be here. So stop rendering the tags, put in some code, and then it's just going to magically understand that. So there's an end tag there as well. This is the code for clicking the button, for counting up. This is kind of nice. We can write this in C#. We have a couple of other files that are important in this project. The first one is host, _host. It contains all the things around the page. So we have the HTML tag, we have the head tag, body tag, and we got the app tag. And we're rendering a component of type app. We have 3 different rendering modes. In this case, we are using the server pre-rendered. The server pre-rendered is going to make sure that everything is rendered and done before it gets pushed from the server. If you just select server, it's going to fix everything on the server side and push it when it's done. So we're going to get a blank screen, and when it's done, it's going to show up. We also have static, and static is going to wait, get everything done, push it over, and then disconnect. So if you send any updates, if you click any buttons, nothing will happen. It will not send those back to the server. We have the app.razor. App.razor is the component that is rendered, as I showed you, and it contains all the routing information. So the app.razor file is going to make sure that it's going to get routed to the right components. And if there's no component at that address, it's going to show, sorry, there's nothing here. Here's also where you want to add authentication, for example. But I promised you a to-do app. So in this project, I have a component. I call it to-do list, and we're going to build it right now. So in the Razor project, the shared project, I have prepared a file called to-do list. The first thing we need is a list of to-do items. So let's create one of those. I'm going to say list to-do item, and it's going to be a list of the type to-do item. I also have a to-do service here. So the to-do service is only helping me with the access to the API layer. I'm not going to talk about this more either, but it has a delete item, update item, all the things that the API has. It's just going to help me call those APIs. We go back to the API, to the to-do list. What we need to inject the to-do service. So I'm going to just say inject the to-do service, and I'm going to name it service. Then when we go into this page, I want the to-do items to get loaded. So if we create a override on initialize the sync. So when this page is initialized, I want the items to get loaded. So I'm going to say items equals await service get items. And I'm going to call the base class as well. There we go. Now I want to show the item. So I have a section, I have a UL tag. So let's create a for each. We're going to loop over the items, and we're going to create an li for each item. We're going to use an input checkbox, and then I'm using the @bind parameter. So I'm telling Blazor I want to bind the value of the checkbox to something C#. So I'm going to say item is done. So if that property is true, it's going to be checked. It's just going to happen automatically. Then I want an on-click. So when I click the item, I want to update the item as well. So I'm going to send an anonymous method. I'm going to say update item and send in the item as well. Next up, I want to be able to click an item. And the nav link is a Blazor component or Razor component. So I'm going to say that I want the href to be to do, and then I want to add the item ID to that. And the text, I want the text to be the title. Close up that nav link. Then I'm going to create a button. And this button is not going to be any button. This is going to be danger button. So I'm going to say danger. When I click this, I want it to run the delete item method. I want it to say delete. And I want to close up the li. There we go. So we have a couple of methods that we need to implement. We have the update item. The update item is just going to call the service, update item, and send in the item. The delete item method. Now I promised you no JavaScript. I lied. We're going to have just a tiny bit of JavaScript. Because when I click the delete button, I want the UI to say, hey, are you sure you want to delete the item? So we're going to say, we're going to create a variable. We're going to await JS runtime. So the JS runtime is our way to invoke JavaScript. And there are ways to invoke C# code from JavaScript as well. I'm not going to show you that though. So I'm going to say JS runtime, invoke async. I want a bool back, and I want to execute the confirm command in JavaScript. And do you really want to delete this? So if the result is true, I want the service to get called, and I want to delete the item. I also want to delete it from the items list. So I'm going to say items removed, and I'm going to remove the item. And then I have to call something called state has changed, because this is a synchronous method. So I need to say that, tell the UI in this case, please update yourself. Something changed, you need to take care of it. So there we go. So if I run this now, I need to, you see that I have a red squiggly. I need to also add and inject the IJS runtime, and I'm going to call it runtime. There we go. If I run this now, if I click the to-do list, something failed. I'm going to get this nice error message down here. I can press F12 and go into the console, and here I will see the .NET exception if I want to. I can reload the page, typically go to the to-do list, and I will get this nice, perhaps not that nice, but an error message. So it's easy to debug this. What it says is, I'm trying to instantiate a to-do service, but .NET knows nothing about the to-do service. So we need to tell .NET, how to instantiate that as well. So I'm going into my startup and I'm going to add a service, add scoped, and I'm going to add the to-do service. This makes sure that the injector knows what class it should instantiate. So I'm going to run the to-do list again. And I got items. Woo! Come on. I got items. And if I press one of these, sorry, there's nothing at this address because we haven't built it yet. And if I click delete, do you really want to delete this? No. We have listed our to-do items. Let's check that out. We gotta add a header. Let's do that. That sounds fun. So in our to-do list, not that one, the other one, in our Razor library, we're gonna add a title. I want this to be an H2. I want it to say my items. And then I want a parenthesis and how many items I have left to do. So I'm going to say items, where, not done, and I'm going to count them. I'm going to end the H2. If I run this again, if I click something, I've got 1 item, 2 items, 3 items. This updates, I don't have to say something needs to get updated. When I click the button, it's going to go do a request back to the server, send back the change. And if I do it like, I believe I can do it like this. If I click here, you see only that number gets updated. Right, we added a header. Sweet. But it kind of looks like crap, doesn't it? This is where you no, it looks nice. Awesome. So what we can do, we can use our Razor library and supply a CSS from there. So I've prepared a to-do styles. Actually, we're going to take a look at this one first. I'm using Sass files. So here I have ordinary CSS, nothing fancy about it. I have to-do styles. I'm just going to import my to-do. The import command is going to make sure that the CSS from the to-do file is going to be included. Then I have a compiler config that's going to tell me or tell the compiler that the to-do styles, I want that to be compiled and I want it to be output in www.root CSS. And the www.root folder is a magical folder because everything I put there is going to be accessible from other assemblies. So if we go back to our host file, I'm just going to be able to say link, href, and here's the magic word, _content. I want the content, I want it to be able to get the content from another assembly. So I'm going to say _content, the name of the assembly, in this case manamanab.razor, where it is located in the www.root folder, CSS, right? And to do styles. And I'm also going to say that this is a style sheet. So if I run this now, no, that's no button. Woo! So we can share the styles between applications. Yeah, I know I'm not a designer. For me, this looks nice. So we can share the CSS between between different projects, which I will show you in just a bit. But reality, we usually add things to our to-do lists, right? Rather than check them off, to be honest. So we need something to add a to-do item as well. And I prepared one of those, our to-do item edit. I want this component to be able to edit an item, and I want it to be able to create a new item. The first thing we need is a parameter to tell what item we should edit. So we're going to add a attribute parameter and a public end to do ID, and we're going to do a get and set. The parameter attribute makes it possible to access the parameter from outside the component. Now let's add the form. We're going to do edit form. Edit form is going to render as a form tag in the end. I'm going to say edit form. I need to supply a model, and our model is the item which I created just below. And I have a couple of events. In this case, on valid submit. So if everything looks good, I want it to save the item. I'm also going to add a data annotation validator. The data annotation validator is going to check against data annotations, kind of in the name. You remember those I created, the required and the min length? It's going to check that does the model or the text that I've typed in match the attributes. I'm going to create a div just to make it a little bit more beautiful. I'm going to add a label, and then I'm going to add an input text. Input text is going to render as a text, actually an input of type text in the end. But I have a couple of helper methods when I'm using this. So I can say bind value. I'm going to bind that against the item title. And then I'm going to add a validation message. And I'm going to add that validation message for the item.title. So if something is wrong in the model, the message is going to show up there in the validation message. Then we're going to create another one. We're going to create a label. You know this already. In this case, we're going to use a input text area instead, because we want to have more than one line. We're going to bind the value to the description, and we're going to add a validation message as well, and end up with a div. We also need a button, and we want that button to be a success button, because adding an item should be successful. I'm going to say that this is a submit button. I'm going to top off the edit form. So I don't have to use a specific button. Since the button is inside the edit form, it knows that I'm trying to submit the edit form, and on valid submit, it's going to run the method save item. Let's see here. So we want to be able to load the item when we go into this page as well. So on parameter set, I'm going to say that if to do is not 0, I'm going to set the item, get the item from the service. But if it is 0, it's probably a new item. So I want to add and set the item to a new to-do item. There we go. Since I want to use this as a component as well, I'm going to have two components on the same page. So I want to be able to notify between the components. So I want to add a event callback. This is going to be a parameter. It should be accessible from outside. It's going to be a public event callback, and I'm going to send back a to-do item. I'm going to call it item added, and add it get set. So in our save item, So if the item ID is 0, it's a new item, I want to add a new item. If it's not, I want to update the item. But if I add a new item, I want to await the item added event handler I just created. And I want to send in the new item. Like so. So now our component is done. Now we want to go back to our main project and go into our pages and to do. The to-do page is where we go into a specific item. The first thing we need is a parameter. We want to be able to set what item we want to show. So I want to say I want to add a parameter, I want it to be an int, and I want to call it to-do ID. We already talked about the page directive. So how can we route to the page? We're going to add a page. I'm going to say that /to-do, and I'm going to add a bracket. I'm going to say to-do ID needs to be an int. So the URL up there is going to connect with the to-do ID parameter because it has the same name and the same type. Then I want to add the component I created. So to-do item edit, I want to send in the to-do ID, and I want to use the parameter to-do ID, like so. So if I run this now, are you as curious as I am? Let's see. Wow, it works. So now we can show, now I can click into these different items. If I remove all the text and I tab out, I'm going to get the title is required. You remember how you did this with MVC? You need to have JavaScript involved and you didn't know what happened. Well, I still don't know what happens, but if I type one character, not tab apparently, it's going to say, well, it needs to be at least 5 characters long. And it's not as visible on the projector, but the text box is actually just a little bit red. And if I type something that is longer, it's going to get a little bit green. But this is the styles from Microsoft. Bootstrap has a lot of nice styling as well. What I typically do is I go into my styles. I have a form style here. I know this is a little bit controversial to do it like this. I'm saying that all the text areas should have the same attributes as Bootstrap's form control. I'm saying that valid and modified. So what happens is when the data annotation validator checks everything out, everything is good, it's going to get modified and valid, those two classes. So if it is valid and modified, I want all the attributes that is available in those Bootstrap classes. We also have a validation message. I'm going to say invalid feedback, and you're going to use the Bootstrap invalid feedback. I'm also going to add the form to, I'm going to say import forms. There we go. If I run this again, you will see that the text fields looks a whole lot better. If I remove the text, it's going to have a little bit of an exclamation mark. If I type something that is okay, it's going to say, yes, you did it. The curious thing about just that small checkbox is that it's going to give your users serotonin, and they will be a lot happier. kind of spooky, but it works that way. All right. Let's go back to the presentation. Next up, we have the future. Where is this going? When we're loading JavaScript today, we're downloading the JavaScript, we're parsing the JavaScript, we're compiling the JavaScript, and then it's going to go into the JIT compiler and get executed. With WebAssembly, we're just going to bypass all of that and go directly into JIT compiler or JIT interpreter, because a JIT interpreter can read WebAssembly. So what Microsoft did was they took the Mono runtime, compiled that to WebAssembly, so it's running in our web browser, running our .NET DLLs. We're not compiling C# to WebAssembly. We're compiling it to just normal DLLs, which means that all the DLLs that you use, almost all of them at least, you will be able to use in the WebAssembly version of Blazor. It's going to make sure to download your DLLs, and it's going to make sure to download all the other DLLs that you might need. So it works like this. You remember the server side? We have the Razor components, the Blazor, the render tree, talking to JavaScript, updating the DOM. The WebAssembly version is not that different. The difference is that everything is running in the browser. It's running on mono.wasm, the WebAssembly version of Mono. Running our Razor components, running Blazor, creating a render tree with all the information that we need. It has a JavaScript on this side because WebAssembly can't talk directly to the DOM. We need a JavaScript to talk to the DOM. The only difference here is that we're not using SignalR, we're using JavaScript interrupts instead. Let's check out a demo of WebAssembly. Not that one. Let's run this. Come on, computer. Did you notice that it was a little bit loading up there? Just for a second or so. That's when you download the Mono runtime, you get all the DLLs, you start everything up. If we click the counter, still working. But this time, the Razor components are running inside your web browser. There's no connection to a server. You can host this anywhere. We have fetch data. We have our to-do list. This project, the WebAssembly project, is using the same exact Razor component that I did for the server side. No changes. It's referencing the same project, the same CSS. Everything is exactly the same. But the big difference is if we check the network. It's going to download the Blazor WebAssembly.js. It's going to download mono.wasm. And then it's going to download the manamana.razor file, the one we created earlier. And our shared WebAssembly and all the DLLs that you need. Now, some of you are probably thinking, whew, downloading the Mono runtime, that's crazy talk. This whole application, fair enough, it's not perhaps not that impressive, but it takes 2 megabytes of download, 2.2, I believe. Facebook has 16 megabytes of download in JavaScript. This and the DLLs that are downloaded is going to be compiled, so it's not going to grow exponentially. I think that WebAssembly is a really good solution. Now, perhaps not Blazor, but definitely WebAssembly. I love the fact that Blazor is running our .NET DLLs. No changes. I think it's really cool. How does it feel? Is it cool? Yeah? But Microsoft didn't stop there. They said, could we use Blazor for something else? That would be cool. So they recently announced Blazor mobile bindings. The code looks a little bit different. We have a frame, we have a stack layout, and so on and so. But the components here are Blazor components that is going to create other types of files, of course. So in the mobile project, I have a mobile project, which is my code. And then I have an Android project and an iOS project, which I left alone. I haven't changed anything there. So if you check out our counter, we're using a frame, we're using a stack layout. Looks a little bit different, but the code here looks kind of familiar. We're using the @ sign, we're using the same syntax. We have the code block. And I'm not going to run, I'm just going to show you the result of this is the result of our to-do list. Now, we're not sharing components in this case. They looked completely different. But the cool thing is we can use the same syntax. We can use the same DLLs in the background. If you take a look at the to-do list, it's going to look completely different. We're going to have an entry instead of an item text. We're going to have a button and so on. I think it's really, really exciting where this is going. And last but not least, so Steve Sanderson, he didn't think that mobile bindings was enough. We can do better. We can do something else. We can do something even more exciting. So he created a product called Web Window. And Web Window, if we run the project, we're going to be able to run Blazor applications on the desktop. The code is going to work Linux, Mac, Windows, obviously. We have our counter, right? Are you ready? It's amazing. We have fetch data. We have a Windows integration, so we can see how large the window is, for example. So the possibilities are endless when it comes to what you can do with the Blazor syntax. This is not using WebAssembly. It's not using server-side Blazor. It's using something else. It's running Blazor upon another stack. See? Showed you the mobile bindings, just in case the emulator didn't work. So we can use Blazor, creating interactive web apps for server side, for client side. We can use PWA. So the WebAssembly is going to be released in May. We can use mobile bindings. It's still experimental. We can use Web Window, still experimental. Actually, I had to patch the Git repo because it didn't work as it was. Blazor is how C# developers are going to beat JavaScript. Remember where you heard it first. No more Vue, no more React, Angular, no more Webpack and Parcel, and no more JavaScript or even TypeScript. to quote Rocky, Blazor, we did it! Thank you so much for listening. Please reach out if you have any questions.